Hey guys, this is Tolly and welcome to Let's Build a JRPG. I think this is part 25, but I'm titling this video Tilemap Generation because we're taking a break from a lot of the other stuff. Up until now, we've been primarily in the combat scene, messing around in there. I will go to it quickly, but I do want to do like a dedicated 5-minute video, not a full stream, but like a quick video at some point going over some of this stuff. It's been making some pretty big improvements. Basically got it to like a demo based state where we could kind of play through it. I have it, my controller plugged in, so I have to use the controller right now, but yeah, I can perform some attacks. I can switch between which companion is taking a turn. I can do some attacks. Those attacks fire off, turn order updates. You can perform a series of different actions. You can use healing potions. Stuff is going on there, but it's at a point where I want to stop on this. It's at a really good state, and I want to shift gears for a little while, for the next few months probably. And that's taking a look at dungeon stuff. So combat's coming along. Pretty happy with it. Could be better. Could be worse. But I think the combat's at a point where I want to leave it alone for the time being, and I want to kind of dive into like building dungeons and like actually making stuff. Like an area that you will explore, get into random encounters, find treasures, heal in between battles, go into your menus and upgrade your character, gain skills, yada yada yada. And this is a whole other beast from everything I've been doing so far for the last year or so, or 9 months or whatever we want to call it. It might be 2 years, depending on when you consider the start of this series. But I want to, like, everything we've been doing is super code centric, and it's still going to be code centric in the Tilemap stuff, but it's a completely different section. So it should be a relatively fresh start today. But what do we want to accomplish? So I kind of did some research this morning and figured out a lot of what I want to try and get done. So the main thing is that right now we have these tiles. And if I want to edit these tiles, I can go into this tile map and I can click on the floor and I can use the eyedropper to pick up like the sewer water stuff. This is some really old art that Drixie made a long time ago, but we can put these pieces in here and we can draw them in. The issue though is that it's tedious. There are some new art files that I forgot to bring over before starting the stream, but that's fine. We don't need them right now. But every time you want to add a new piece of art to the palette, you have to like drag it on, and when you drag it onto the palette, it like asks you to put it in a place. Where would you like to put this? And you have to do that for every single image that you add to the palette. It has to generate a tile essentially. And this is becoming tedious and annoying. Every time that Drixie gives me a new set of tiles or a new palette or a new like environment of images, if I have to generate tiles by dragging them onto the palette every time, I'm going to lose my mind. So I like making tools. So what I think I need to do is I need to start by making something that'll generate tiles from a folder. So I want to have some sort of ability to give a folder location and then have a tool or a button in Unity that will generate tile objects from each image in that folder. And ideally, I should be able to run that multiple times, and it should handle removing missing images, so removing tiles that no longer have images associated with it, replacing saved same name images. So if something has the same name, we should swap out the image in the tile to just update it. And then we should, actually, now that I talk this aloud, that may just happen with Unity automatically, but we should also add new images. So if anything is new in that folder, we should make a new tile for it. This I don't think is a thing actually, because if we change the image, as long as it has the same name, it'll be the same reference. Okay, so we need to do that. That's going to be step one. That might be the whole stream today, is just doing this, but I just want to give a folder, have a bunch of images, and it generate a bunch of the tile assets for me. And those tile assets will be like these things. They'll just be in a folder, but then you can drag these onto here, and it's not going to ask me every time to make a new one, because the tile is what I'm actually, that's the prompt I'm getting every time I draw drag an actual sprite in, is it's like, oh, that's just a sprite. We need to make an asset for it. So step one, be able to give it like a folder like this, and then it'll generate a bunch of tiles somewhere, and keep the folder structure ideally similar so that all of the images go in the same spot. Yeah, so that's step one. Step two is it's also kind of annoying to drag each of these things in here. It's better if they're tiles. Like if I generate them as tiles, it'd be nicer to bring them in here. But I kind of feel like I should be able to generate this palette too. This palette should be something that I can make an asset for and generate at the same time. So I give it a folder like sewer, it goes down through sewer, finding all the images, creates tiles for them, and then it creates a palette and adds all of those tiles to that palette so that all of this is automated. I bring in a new folder from Drixie, hit a button somewhere up here, and it'll just make a palette, and then I can just start using that palette immediately to build the map. Which brings us to step three. I recently found out, I downloaded a set of assets from Golden Skull Studios from the asset store. Some pretty cool assets. I like them a whole lot. Probably won't use any of them directly in the game because I want all the art to be Drixie's in the end. But they do allow for like interesting understanding of how to set these things up. These things are giving me ideas of how to place things, how to do collision. There's just some really good learnings in here just on how to set up an environment with these images isometrically and make it look good. And that's the stuff I'm trying to draw on. And when I was looking at this, I realized that the way these are built is very differently from the way that I was building the sewer before. Unity has the ability to do isometric in a couple different ways. One of the main things is if you go into the graphics setting, I was custom setting the axis to 1, and that makes everything look right. But a lot of the other examples I've been seeing has been like -2.6 to -0.4, and that breaks the way I was doing the sewers before. And so I want to change up the way I'm doing it. The reason it's actually breaking is because a lot of these things were a grid that was isometric, but isometric Z as Y allows you to have depth, and the setting it to 1 is kind of like a fakey way of doing it. It's not working perfectly, so I want to change the whole thing. But that means this whole thing is scrapped. All of this layout is kind of throwaway because it just doesn't translate to the new system. Again, so that's the problem statement. So what are we going to do to solve that? So I want to generate these tile maps from a TSV. Essentially, I want to be able to draw maps in like a spreadsheet like this, and I want to be able to download this as a TSV. Each of these boxes right now are actually a number, and I've conditionally formatted so that if the text contains 1, make it gray. And I'm actually making the font gray too, so that it just looks a little nicer to me, honestly. But in reality, these things are, each of these boxes have a number in them. So when we look at this tile map, it's actually like a series of numbers, which we can then interpret and translate into different images to display on the grid. So 3 steps I'm going to be trying to accomplish this weekend. I'll probably do another stream tomorrow in order to get all of this working, but we're going to try and get generating tiles from images from a folder. We're going to try and do generating a palette from those tiles. If this proves to be too difficult, might just put that on hold for now. And then third is going to be generating a tile map from a TSV. So given a TSV, basically set all the positions for everything. Realized I didn't have chat up. Kazikish said hello. Welcome to the stream. That's my long-winded explanation. Honestly, more for YouTube, so people know what they're getting into. Last thing I'll say is, in case you haven't seen these videos before, now's the point where I struggle and where I'm going to be just working through this stuff. It's going to be probably a lot of learning for me, and you're going to be coming along for the ride too. Just setting expectations. So, step 1, we want to convert a folder of images into a bunch of tiles. I think I want to start by looking at my parsers, because essentially that's what my parsers do. Each of these things parse a TSV and turn it into a JSON file. JSON files are a little easier to deserialize into classes in the game. It's just nice. So I'm not going to get into why exactly I do this, but this thing essentially reads in a file location, does a bunch of stuff to interpret it, and then does a file write text and then import. But I don't think that's how I want to do this. Let's bring up start with this file. So what is a tile? Tile is a game object. Are they assets? I think I did a little bit of research this morning, so I'm just going to try and remember where I'm at. I'm pretty sure if we show an explorer, yeah, these are asset files. So I think that means I need to be doing this. Asset database create asset. And this is how you also update it. If you're updating an existing one, you load an asset at a specific path of a specific type. You manipulate it and then you call save. Okay. Okay, so this is the logic I need. This is how we use Unity asset database stuff. And these are all the functions that might come in handy as we build this. Okay. Okay, next step. Let's see. So let's make a new folder. Did my parsers need to live somewhere specific? Oh no, that's not what I wanted to do. Go back. Parser. So let's find those. That was located in this editor folder. And that editor folder is in my JRPG stuff. So let's make a new folder in here, which is going to be tile utilities. How does one spell utilities? It is spelled like that. All right. And then we essentially want to duplicate one of these. Ideally, one of the simpler ones. Counter's pretty simple. And we'll use this as a base to work from. So we'll rename this folder to tiles. Sprite folder to tiles. And we'll grab that name, go into Visual Studio, and that's what this thing will be. And so this can live in the tools. Let's do tiles and import. The tricky thing here is let's grab that other reference I had. This guy. So we're essentially want to get, so this is how to overwrite, so to delete an existing one. So we'll start here because this will be how to make one too. Tile should be a thing using Unity Tilemaps. Okay. So we want to load an existing tile essentially. This may or may not be important. For now, I'll leave it alone. I think that's how we actually make sure that once we're done editing things, it all works, but I think there's other ways of doing that that are more efficient. So this is going to need a file path. So where do we get that file path from? If I put in here string path, and we simply attach that to Unity, and then go to the tool section, we should have a new prompt. Is it going to give me like a pop-up window or something? There's no console errors. It's also not here. Is that because of the path? Does it have to be empty? Oh. This won't do anything good right now, but... yeah, now it shows up. So if I give it a value, it's no longer a valid menu item. It won't work. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So then the next question on our list is Unity menu items parameters. Oh, it's not something out of the box. Shame. Okay. Okay. We'll deal with this later. We're going to need to make an advanced window. So instead of just, being able to create a function that you call from up here like I've done with the other ones, I'm probably going to need to make a sub window. So like when we come into here for some of these things, if we do, this is a good example. This opens up a sub window. We'll probably have to do one of these that's literally just a text field for the path name for where we want to import from, and then just a button that actually executes it with that parameter. But I'll have to do some research on how to do that because that might take me a little bit. So for now, we'll hard code a path. We'll say that there's a specific folder that we're looking for that we're going to try and import from. And in fact, we'll just put that up here. String input. Let's just call it path for now because I want to replace it later. And where is this path going to be? Where would that make sense? Where do the tiles currently live? They live in Tilemap isometric sprites. Okay, so I want that same directory. I think this. Nope, one level down. Starting at the top, I want to go look in this folder for a specific thing. And in fact, I want to look at sewer because we're going to hard code. So what we'll probably want to do is like a primary path or sprite locations, and sprite locations will always want as that, and then we'll want another string which will be input, which can be sewers for this, but the input string will be the one that we modify. This doesn't like that because it doesn't think those are valid. Is that what your problem is? Yes, okay. You have to do double. One of these usually means that it's a special command. And so it's like, hey, you're trying to do a special command. What is it that you want? But if you put in the second one, you're saying the special command I want is just this. Please be quiet. Okay, so then we have path is equal to path dot combine this plus this. Oh, these have to be static because this is a static function. Okay, so this should generate a path, but this isn't what we want to do. What we want to do is probably load all resources. This is going to be a problem. These aren't in a resource folder, are they? They are not. Can we load assets without them being in a folder? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. Unity load sprites from path. Resource can be anywhere though. You can also have folders within a subfolder. Okay. Okay, it just has to be in a resource folder for Unity to know what's up. So I guess the way I'll do this then is I will add a resource folder. Naming's gonna matter. I think it's resource, not resources. No, it's resources. Okay. And then we have to put all of our sprites. Well, to be fair, we don't have to put all of our sprites. For now, I'll just put the ones I want to try and create tiles out of in here. So, isometric, resources, sewer. And that becomes the new location we're going to be looking at. Okay, so that should work. Now the question is, can I do a resource.load while looping through directories? The thing is, I don't know what my directory names are going to be. That's the thing that's tricky about this, is that it might be walls, it might be like sewer water, it might be like floors. We don't know exactly what we're going to be trying to search for. Oh, I missed some comments on YouTube. I'm sorry. I have a lot of windows open. Logar was saying, hello, I don't know anything about what you're doing, but I'll stay. Thank you for that. It's just trying to do some database lookup stuff. You know what? For now, let's simplify. Let's assume that all of the files that we're going to look at are in one folder, and we don't need to worry about subfolders. So instead of all of these being in like one called flat and one called raised, what we'll do is we'll just dump all of them into the sewer folder. If it'll let me. Oh, I moved the wrong ones. Let's put those back. Okay, so here we'll dump all of these ones into sewer and then delete flat. Then we will dump all of these. Actually, wait a second. Was he implying that if it's one folder deep, it will work? I can easily get to the path fireball since it's located in the first subfolder of resources. Fireball. Oh no, this still requires you to know what it is. Okay, yep, alright. So I don't know what my folder structures are going to be, so I'm going to have to assume all of my images are just dumped in the main one. Oh, we have the V2 ones. Those are the ones I thought I had to copy over. I must have copied them over a while ago. Okay. So these are a bunch of sprites that we want to turn into tiles that go onto this thing. So we just go to this folder. So now that we want to go to this folder, I think we just do load all. Yeah, once we eliminate the complexity of having to do subdirectories, I think we just take the path and we load all sprites. And this should return an array of sprites, which will be all sprites. Okay. Then we should just have to loop through that. For each sprite in all sprites, then we want to create a tile, so like this. But at this point we have a sprite. Does the sprite have a path associated with it? It doesn't. This is the problem here, is that I'm taking from a series of different like articles and like helping guides, but I'm trying to mash them all together. So we are looking at this for reference. And I had somewhere else where I found the load all. I was looking at that earlier. But the question is, how do we... I see. So we're loading all the sprites here, but we want to create and load tiles from a different directory. So we're going to be loading from one, but outputting to another. So right now it's tile maps. Where do we put tiles? Currently they go into a folder called tiles. So show this. We want this thing. And we want to put that in here. And this will be where we're going to put our tiles. Tile locations. Okay, and then we can rename this to sprite path, and this will be tile path. And then this will be the tile location plus the input directory. And then technically we have to do one more combine. Load path. I don't love these names, but we're going to just work through it. And this will be the name of the sprite. So we're going to say, okay, load up for me all the sprites that exist in the sprites folder sewer. And then I'm going to try and load for every one of those sprites a tile with the same name. The question is whether or not that fails. This creates one. What are the return types? It's an object. Returns the matching object. Returns the first asset of type at a given asset path. This only returns it if the visible in the project. If the asset is not found, load asset at path returns null. Okay, so if existing tile equals null, that means there isn't one created yet. And then if there isn't one created yet, that means we need to create one. Just gonna grab this for a second and then piece out the pieces I need. So we're not gonna do this. Instead, what we're gonna do is tile equals new tile. Tile name will be equal to the sprite name, and tile dot sprite will be equal to the sprite. And then that's basically setting this thing up. I think that's all the tile has basically, is just a sprite. It also has a color and stuff, but the main thing is we're setting what sprite we want this tile to have. I don't think we have a path yet because we've established it doesn't exist. We're not overwriting. Then we'll be creating the asset, which is tile, at the load path location. So tiles path, and this should probably be tile path. Again, I'm still not loving this, but I hope that's clear enough. Some people over in chat, Bo Ray, I'm sorry if I mispronounce, watched your whole playthrough of Bully 8-9 years ago, and now this is in my recommendations. Whoa. Yeah, it's not quite the same content anymore. Morphus, welcome. How you doing today? I'm doing quite well. We're working on trying to basically automate some stuff in Unity. So we're basically... these images here, if I want to draw with them on the screen, so if I want to take these images and I want to place some down, I have to drag these images into here. But every time I do that, it asks me to create an asset for it, because these things need to be turned into assets in order for you to draw with them, essentially. And it's annoying to get this pop-up for every single image that I want to add to this palette to draw with. So we're trying to make a thing that if we give it a folder, it will just convert all of the images into that folder into a bunch of tiles so that I don't have to do it by hand every time. That's the long and short of it. And we're almost there, maybe. So we're creating an asset, which is tile, which has the sprite. Theory Infinity over on Twitch. Oh, we're saying hi now. Guess I should come out of the woodworks. Yeah, this would be the time. Good to see people. I don't even think I got a chance to message on Discord. Sorry, I didn't poke on Discord beforehand. I was on a roll this morning. I did a bunch of research on all this stuff. And even though I did a bunch of research, I still feel like the first, what's the stream been? 40 minutes has still been me struggling, even though I did a bunch of fact finding first. Wasn't good enough. but I'm getting through it, and I just really want to try and get this solved. So I don't think we care about this. I guess we want to do this. We're saying this tile needs to be saved, essentially. I'm going to get rid of these comments. And then we save the assets. Okay. And then in my parser, I had this code that was like asset database import. Is there like just a generic re-import all that I can use? Import. It's not where I want to be looking. Write import, set import override, import asset. I've seen the word refresh around as well. Import any changed assets. This is probably the one I want. Not here though. So after we finish bringing everything in, we want to do a refresh so Unity repopulates everything for us. Okay, so this is if it doesn't exist. I actually think we want to do... That makes more sense. So we try and get the tile. If the tile's null, we generate a tile and create the asset. I think there might be a better way to do this, but I'm going to just do it in an else statement. I'm repeating logic, and I don't like writing the same code twice, so there should be a way to do this without having to do the else. I'm just not sure whether or not I can do this after I've already called create asset. So for safety matters, we're going to say if it's null, i.e. there wasn't one to load, then we're going to do this and create it. Otherwise, if we found something, if it wasn't null, we'll go in here and we'll set the name and the sprite. Although honestly, the name shouldn't change. Should just be updating the sprite. I don't think we need to update the sprite if we find it. Whatever. Should work either way. Okay, so if I go in here, tiles, import, that should have generated a bunch of tiles. There's no way to know if it worked or failed, I guess. We'll have to debug. All right, so let's walk through the code step by step and see what exactly happens when we run that function. So... oh, nothing. Cool. Cool. That's my favorite. I didn't put a breakpoint high enough, I don't think. Yep, there we go. So we get in here, we find a path, which is tilemap, tilemap, tilemap. Tilemap, tilemaps. Is that right? Tilemap, tilemaps, isometric. Oh, it's in the wrong spot. Tilemap, isometric. Resources. Sewer. Okay. Helps if we point at the right location. All right, so now let's try that again. Import. Oh, what's that? Oh, followed by Hopac. I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm sure I am. All right, all sprites. We found 0. Okay, so our sprite path is still wrong. Resource map, or sorry, tile map of tile maps, isometric, resources, sewer. That should be the correct location. Because I believe it should be based off of... most basic premises are proving wrong. Does it just need the one below? I have 0 knowledge about C#, but this is still pretty fun to watch as someone just getting into programming. It is the real look of failing continuously until we eventually succeed. I think we're close, though. I think it just needs to be sewer. I think that it doesn't care about the entire file path. It just cares about folders that are in resources. So let's try... We're not hitting a breakpoint, are we? We are. Let's continue. Let's try running that again, but this time with no value. So we're just going to say that the sprite path is sewer. Now it found 32. Yeah, okay. So it doesn't need a whole directory. So as long as our folder where our images are is under the resource folder, we just need the name of the folder directly under it. And resources can be anywhere. Okay, so we just need to look up a folder with the right name. Okay, so that'll get us some tile paths. Tile path location is tilemap, tile maps, isometric tiles sewer, which should exist. Isometric tiles sewer. Okay. Now these things have the same name, so this should actually be a good test to see if it finds some of these things. Tile was null, so it couldn't find this, but it couldn't find this because it was missing the PNG. This is the name. We're going to make a pretty bold assumption, which is not good code, but whatever. And we're going to assume that the files are PNGs that we're loading. If it's not a PNG, we're not going to load it. I'm in charge of the everything, so I will say that all of my files will be PNGs. Did that break for some reason? It did. It added it as a path. It added the thing. I need to do this instead. Path combine adds slashes in between, basically. So I don't need to add the slash. Parent directory must exist before creating an asset. Mm-hmm. All right, fine. Let's... Specifically line 35. So we're trying to create it. So we didn't find it. That's still a problem because we would expect to find it. Is it because I need assets at the front? Technically everything in Unity is under the assets folder. Let's clear that and then let's run it again. Oh, it's doing something. Look at that little wheel. It's thinking a whole bunch. Okay. Well, it still failed on some stuff. Could not find asset from... Oh, right. Get myself all confused. These are not PNGs. What we're actually manipulating are dot assets. So Yeah, at this point we've already loaded all the PNGs. Now we're trying to find dot assets that have the same name as the sprite name. Getting there. Step by step. Okay. It's thinking. It's thinking. Seems reasonable. Line 44. Interesting. Still saying .png. Did I just not save? I don't think we need to save assets every time either. We can wait until we're done the loop before saving. That's why it's taking so long. All right. Oh. Let's walk through the code. So we're getting a tile path that is assets, base asset 0. That should map to something, so that seems reasonable. Still getting null though. So why is this returning null? This should be a location. So load asset at path, I guess we need to check and see how this function works, because I'm guessing I'm using it incorrectly. Assets, textures. Okay. That looks right. Did I put in the location wrong? I thought I checked it a couple times. Assets, tile map, tile maps, isometric, tiles, sewer. I think we have the sewer in there. Base asset 00. This one. Interesting. I have flooded this with bad information. It's because it's asset, not assets. That's part of the problem. Every little number and letter matters. All right. An open source tree. Source tree keeps track of all the changes between when I last worked and what I'm working on now. So we're going to open that up and we're going to try and remove all of the wrong files that we've just generated in there. Because I think we were making things called .asset with an S, even though it was failing. Unity is no longer opening. Are you just hard crashed, friend? Oh, we're still debugging. That's why it's being non-responsive. Okay, and then source tree. We can see all of the files that we've added to this folder. That's the resource files. We don't want to get rid of those. But the tiles, I think we want to remove all of these. Yes. Okay. Now let's try this. that work? We should now have a pipe short. We do. Okay. And those should have shown up in here. They did. So there's new files that we didn't have before. For the sake of testing, let's just try dumping all of these. Actually, let's just try deleting the new one. So that's gone. Import. It's back. Okay. Cool. So I'm going to have to figure out a couple things off camera because I don't want to dig into them right now because they're going to take too long, but I'll inform later. But we need to figure out how to make it so that when we actually click on this, it doesn't just run the function, but it actually gives a little window where we can choose what folder we want. So instead of just having sewer hard-coded, we can have some sort of little window that allows us to type in the text of the folder we want to import. That should primarily be it. I don't think we need this. I don't think we need to update assets because technically this has a reference to the sprite. So if something had the same name and it already existed, it would already point to the right one. So if I rename, or if I added a new floor tile 8 and replaced this file, it would just have the replaced version. So we don't need to reset the sprite. We basically only need to create these things if there isn't a tile with the same name as a sprite in the original folder. Cool. That took longer than I anticipated. Let's take a look at what we were trying to accomplish. 2 seconds. Okay. So we are now at a point where we can generate tiles. Next thing I wanted to do was try and generate a palette. So I wanted to try and get it so that we could basically make a palette, which is essentially one of these things. And for every file that we generated into a tile, add every one of those tiles to the palette for us. Debating whether or not that's worth doing right now. It'd be really nice. So that we don't have to basically come in here and drag each of these things in. But it's not even that bad right now. Once they're converted into tiles. The main problem was this pop-up asking me to save it somewhere. That was super annoying. But when they're already tile assets, just adding them ourselves here isn't too bad. And I bet you I can just grab a bunch of them and, yeah, plop them in too. Wish the spacing could be a little bit different, like there was one space between each of these, but technically that works. So spending an hour or two making a bunch of scripts that are going to generate things probably isn't worth it. This is also a more complicated task because technically these are just a single asset that have a single sprite on it. These palettes are actually prefabs, which have a grid and then a subcomponent that has a tile map. and a tilemap renderer, which is turned off. And then you have to set each of the tiles to specific coordinates on that tile map, essentially. So you have to generate like several objects in order to build a palette from scratch in code. Oh, and I guess it technically needs a palette setting. Where's the palette setting live? It's not in the prefab, it's like underneath. Ooh. How do you add this to it from code? I missed that when I was doing research. Okay, yeah, I definitely can't do that right now because this is going to be a blocker. I don't know how to convert this from just being a prefab to being a palette prefab, I guess. So we're going to move on to the next step, and we'll come back to the palette stuff if and when it becomes a problem. Because honestly, it doesn't seem that bad now that we've got step 1 done. This no longer seems as dire. So the next step is trying to generate a tile map from a TSV. So we have this, which each of these sections represent something. So these zeros, which are, I showed this at the beginning, but I'll show it again real quick. Each of these things are conditionally formatted. So I've set up the spreadsheet. So if a piece of text contains a 1, it changes the font color to gray and the background color to gray. So it looks like it's like, you know, not there, but in reality, there are numbers in every one of these colored squares. And then when we download that, that looks something like this, which is a bunch of numbers to represent what tiles we would want. So my next question is, can I take this TSV of numbers and try to draw on my map tiles that represent each of those? And I believe I can. I believe I can. So, let's turn off these tile maps that I was playing with before. Let's create a new tile map. Say 2D. We want this to be on individual. This is off. Now it's correct. Yeah, okay. Okay, that's what we want. I'm just testing it. So basically, if I hit down, it actually goes up. Minus key is the up key for some reason. I don't know. But if I use these keys to go up and down, you can kind of see that if I place this at 0, that's like sitting on the ground. But if I go up 2, now I can place one stacked on top. And if I go up 2 more, I can go up again. But I can also go below. And so like I'm technically, all of these things are placed on this square, but at different heights by moving it up and down. And you can kind of see that, which is kind of cool. And we can delete them. So the base of this thing, it's interesting though, because technically that looks like it's like 2 next to each other, but in reality it's 1 lower on the same tile. Isometric's messy with your brain. It messes with your brain. Okay, so this is a tile map. So now I want to make a script that I'm just going to put on an empty game object. And I need to make this script somewhere. So for now, let's close all of our scripts. 3 dimensions and 2 dimensions too many. Correct. Let's add just a debug for now. We'll find its own folder eventually. Generate tilemap from TSV. Okay, and let's add that here. And this thing is going to want to reference to Tilemap. Cool. It now has a reference to a tile map. And then for the sake of testing, we're going to make a series of tiles, which will be floor, wall, sewer, probably all we need for now. We actually want to run this in the editor window. Buttons on scripts. Unity. We want this at editor time. Script component. This is what I want to do. This is what I want. This is 100% what I'm looking for. I just want a button on the script that'll do a thing. So I want to go into Unity inside of my editor. I want to create a new script, which is like generate tile map from TSV editor. And I want to do this. And this thing needs to be generate tile map from TSV is the type that this thing is overriding, and editor is its name. Well, it's getting in there. Okay, it's running functionality. So I've added a button to this thing. Can I... What is target in this context? The object being inspected. So if I make a public function called generate, nope, like that, it needs a return type, which will be void. And I say in the inspector that if the button is pressed, then target.generate. It doesn't know what it is. So do I have to cast it to the correct type? And then generate? Do I need to wrap it in more brackets? More brackets! Generate. Okay, cool. And then for context, we'll make that called generate too. Now, that all being said, I lost my references when I did this. Where did my inputs go? Default. This is the part that's missing. Now it'll draw the regular stuff. Aha! All right. And now we will pick some tiles. So we'll have... let's see, what's this one? That's a basic wall. And that is called simple wall. So that will be our wall tile. Wet rock gray, I'm pretty sure is the floor. And then sewer. I think we still like floor tile water. I need to teach Drixie some better naming schemes. Name formatting is a big, big thing. And it is not as easy as it seems. Alright, so now we're calling generate. So... last piece of the puzzle is we need to know where our TSV is. So if we look at our parser, how does this load up our TSVs normally? Like this. Okay, so we need to do the same thing here essentially. But instead of for design data, actually I think I stuck the TSV in the same spot. So for the sake of ease, we'll just modify it there. But what was it called? Sample map sheet 1. Sure. Seems like a reasonable name if I've ever heard one. It's not. It's a really bad name. All right, so this is going to try and find a TSV at the folder location. It's going to read it into a text file. Then we're going to loop through all of this for int I is greater than read text dot length plus plus I. Loop through, and if read text I there's a missing piece I didn't grab. This. We need this as well. We need to read through the text, split them by tabs. That'll give us elements. Then we also need to loop through the elements, and we'll because we're doing this on a grid, we'll say that this is X. Actually, it's the other way around. This is Y. Because technically the read text, this is all the lines. So if we think about that in terms of our graph, which is this thing, each one of these is a line, essentially. And then so we're reading each of these lines like this. And then when we separate the values by split by tabs, that's essentially going, okay, now for each of these lines, separate it into this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, etc., etc. So the Y value will be the number, what line we're on, and the X value will be what column we're on, essentially. And to make that clear, we can call this rows and columns. And then this can be X values. Okay. And this needs to be Y. And then inside of this for loop, if column X does not equal... Actually, there's a better way to do this. We can do string dot empty is empty or null. And then we can put a not sign at the front. So this is saying if it's not empty or null, then we go in here and we will try and grab our tile map and we will try and set a tile, and we will set a tile at new vector 3 int with x, y, 0. And then the tile we will set will have to be determined by what the value is. So bad code. This is not the right way to write this, but let's just get it functioning and see if it works. And if it works, then we can go from there. Whatever this value is, we should be expecting essentially a couple things. -1, which I've essentially decided is my let's not make this every time we loop through. Let's at the top of the file, right here, current selected tile will for default equal floor, just so it's not nothing. Okay, and so then this is equal to sewer water. 0 I set to be my walls, and I believe 1 was floor. And then whichever one we have, whatever number is in there, we set that value. Else, if we found that it was empty or null, we actually still want to set null as the value. That way, if we're running this multiple times and I've made an edit, it'll delete essentially any tile that was in that spot. Cool. Generate. Excellent. Very good. Let's set this to be on the same level as the character, so now the character can walk behind the walls. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's do a thing. What happens if we do sewers? Z value. Z value by default is equal to 0. Actually, I have a question. Can I do like a clear? This is better. Before we try and add anything to our tile map, we should just try and empty it, essentially. That way we don't have to worry about like not deleting something on weird Z values, because we were only deleting on 0 before. So we're going to start by just clearing, and then Z value here can be -1. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be -1 or +1. But for sewer tiles specifically, I want to try and change the depth up. So when we generate this thing, they now go down. Okay. And then if I swap the floors for walls, and hit generate, that didn't work the way I wanted it to, because it's on the same level. But what if I decrease the level of the floor too? I think it needs to go down by 2. Amorphous, this is the same music I've played for every part of the JRPG. This has been 25 parts, and this is some music. Interesting. I'm gonna just mess with some stuff now. I'm just curious. Can I do multiples? This is not the right way to do this in the end, but yeah, I would be very surprised if you recognize this from somewhere else. It's just from like a Unity asset pack. I think I showed it at the very beginning in the very first part. It was from like a Final Fantasy, or not Final Fantasy, a JRPG like music style pack or something. Music for RPGs or something. I have another one. If you want, I can. I only really ever play 2, which is this one, which is some village theme, and then this loopy theme. This is supposed to be a battle theme, but I think this one's also kind of just mellow. I like them because I honestly forget it's there, to be honest, and it's just not me humming and hawing. It just breaks things up a little bit in these videos, and they're so good at just being non-distinct, I find, that they don't impede my thinking, and I don't think they break up my talking too much either. Okay, so now what we should do is when there is a floor tile, we will make a floor at 0 and a wall at -2. So the floor will sit above the wall, but the wall will add depth below it, so that when we have spots with the sewer, there's not a gap between the floor and the sewer. Well, that didn't work. Oh, that didn't work because we didn't change the floor back to being floor. It's still just walls. So it's just walls as far as the eye can see. This one. That worked as I thought it would. Okay, okay. Interesting. There needs to be some here as well. So walls need to go down 2 levels, but only from very specific angles? Fascinating. Oh, I didn't save the tile map depth. 1 is what our character is at right now. Huh. Okay. So right here we would want walls as well. Yeah, isometric is stupid hard. But, like, I think it's worth it. Like, me and Drixie have these conversations, like, once a week when she's doing pixel art stuff and, like, we're working towards this isometric style. And this is really the next big jump, right? Like, the combat stuff wasn't isometric, but we've been talking about it for months about how this isometric might be a dumb approach because we could just do, like, a traditional Final Fantasy VI kind of, like, top-down look, and it would be far easier to probably build levels and to build art for those levels. But there's something about this isometric that I really like, and I think it's going to be worth the challenges in the end to make something that's, I don't know, not just the basic top-down. Yeah. Another thought I have is this is currently generated from this perspective, right? But the map I made was technically like this, so everything got flipped at some point. What if we read this stuff in different directions? What about instead we did reversed? So it starts at the greatest value, and as long as y is greater than 0, and we minus y. I think that's how you do an inversed, how you loop through a list backwards, but I always forget. Nope. I think it's -1 and equals. Interesting. So flipping it didn't matter? That feels counterintuitive. What about doing the same thing on the X? Really? Is this still looping? Like maybe it's just breaking somewhere in some way that I'm not seeing, but not error, not giving an error. No, at this point it should be blanked out. Oh, it's not though. I'm gonna just write a clear function real quick just to do a sanity test here, because I would expect that by flipping the order that we draw these things, it would flip the order that we draw these things. Like that, I imagine that should work. So let's add a clear button, which I think is just doing this. Unity, where'd you go? Oh, wait. Even though I'm reading this in right or backwards, it doesn't matter because the X and Y values will still be the same every time. So it doesn't matter the order I read this thing in at. All that matters is what the X and Y are. So whether I read it left or right, up or down, it's still going to come in with the same spot being the same spot regardless. Interesting. So instead, I need to alter the XY position. So let's leave this as standard array functionality, because this is where my brain lives and it's happy here. It likes this little space where X is equal to 0, and if X is less than the length, then we're in a happy place. You know, this is good code. It's not good or bad code. It's just code I like. But then how do we inverse this? How do we inverse X? I think it's the math here is column length minus X. Actually, I shouldn't be newing everywhere. Every time I do this new call, it's like creating a new object, and creating new objects is not cheap. So let's create one position at the top, which is like tile position. And that's equal to a new vector3 int. And then here we do X value is equal to whatever we decide. And then we can like manipulate the X and Y value in one line of code instead of having to copy and paste for every spot in the switch statement. And then this is just the tile position. And then this can be tile position dot Z equals -2 here, which means we no longer need a Z position either. This cleans things up nicely. We set it to 0 by default here. We set Y. For now, we'll just set it to Y. We won't inverse this one. And then we don't need the Z value anymore. And then we just need to set the Z value here and here to 0 and to -2. Technically, it should be already 0, but I'm going to be very explicit about this part so that there's no confusion when reading the code. Because we're technically doing 2, and I might want to flip them. I might want to do floor then wall or something. So, Okay, that should now inverse. So if we hit clear and then generate, now she's flipped. Interesting. Interestingly fun. So I don't have to keep changing the code. Flip x is equal to false. Bool flip y is equal to false. Let's add that I in there. And then by default, this can just be equal to x. But if we want to flip by x, then we do this. And because it's only one line of code, I'm going to be less specific with my wording or with my code, and I'm going to make it like look kind of worse. Some people hate this, but I like reduced code. And so for me, I like to remove these brackets every now and again because this is just adding extra space, whereas this just looks a little cleaner to me. All right, cool. So now we should have some bools. So if we just generate, that happens. If we hit generate here, it goes like that. If we do this, it generates like this. And then if we do, that's one other variant. And this is the variant that's closest to what I was actually picturing in my mind when I was building it. Fascinating. What's our current zoom level? Like, how close is some of this stuff? How much can we see on screen at any one time? So say that we start the dungeon here, we're walking through, we've got a little bit of sewer, that's neat, we walk through here. Okay, interesting. So we can just barely see this whole platform on screen at once. Could maybe go one more tile higher, but for the most part, this platform I've made, which I think is 4 out from this either side of this pillar, and this pillar is 2. So this means that this is a 10 by 10 grid. A 10 by 10 grid is about as big as you can see on screen at one time right now, with our current zoom level on the camera. Can we do this live? We can. Interesting. Fascinating. Technically, that means we can do camera rotation if we wanted, but we wouldn't be rotating the camera. We would be rotating the world. And by rotating, I mean redrawing the whole world. It is rotating, right? Like, it's rotating around a point. So if I flip the X, this part's here. If I flip the Y... Oh, that's not rotated. Never mind, it's not rotated. It's flipping across a horizontal. Like, technically, like, even the X flip, is that a rotation around? Like, is this turning it around when I do that? Or is a flip not the same as a turn? I don't think a flip is the same thing as a turn. Yeah, sorry, I didn't get to that point, but I was thinking about that amorphous, and it's a good call out. Is technically right now we're flipping around, like, the center of the map, I guess, wherever the map is, we're flipping around that, but we'd actually need to be, like, I mean, what we'd honestly do is try and figure out what position the character was on, like what tile position, and then we'd flip the whole world. And then after we do the flip, we'd put the character back to wherever that tile was. So if he was standing, let's say this tile is 20 by 25, that's its XY position. It's 20, 25. Technically, after we do the flip, this tile would still be, it wouldn't be 20, 25 anymore. But we could figure out what tile this is in relation to the whole map, and we could go back to where you were supposed to be. And if we teleport the character anywhere, the character has the camera anchored to him. So if we go here and just stick him in this position, then it would look like the camera rotated. I don't know if I want to do that, to be honest. I just think it's more fascinating than anything that I can technically do like that, and it does a thing. But I'm still trying to wrap my head around whether or not a flip is a rotate. I think it is. Because this, you couldn't see you can't see part of this platform now because the wall's blocking it, and you can't see the other side. But when I flip this, now you can see the whole platform in this wall, and you can see yeah, I think it is a rotate. It's just confusing because it's always 180 if I just tick one of these. So if we're here, assuming this is 0, right? Like no rotation. If I want to rotate this, accounting for rotation, you'd also have to take into account every possible rotation when building levels. It would make it easier to know exactly what angle the player will be viewing the level from. This is true. This is also very true, especially when we get into like cities. Like cities might have to be built from one specific angle. If we draw like a huge house, it may not be built up of individual wall pieces, but we might just build just the storefront, and having to do the back of the house might be an undue amount of work. But we could have it something like in dungeons you can rotate the camera, but in the levels of the town you can't, but that might be jarring for the player too. So yeah, but it's definitely interesting. But I just want to finish this thought of, if I want to rotate this so that this is here, then what I need to do is I need to flip XY? No. It should be here. So flip on the X? No. Is there any way to make this appear over here? That's the question. Now it appears on the bottom. No. Okay. Okay. I don't think there is any way. Because technically, when we flip across the X, we're just moving this from here to here. When we flip across the Y, we're moving from here to here. But at no point does this end up facing this way. This is either facing like north or it's facing south, but it's never facing east or west. So yeah, we're not rotating. We can flip north-south, but we can't rotate east-west. Yeah, because we can never get this over here either. So this will never be here with our current system. Because I can move this position up to here. I can flip it here. But how would I turn this tile to here? I think you'd need to do some sort of manipulation. Like it's not just like putting this one here, or drawing it here or here. You actually have to do something where there's a way to do this. There has to be a way to do this. Yeah. Okay. I think to flip is to alternate. What was X becomes Y, and what was Y becomes X. I don't need to be running for this, per se. That does it. Yeah. So whatever was an X position... And, okay, so now when we're in alternate mode, ticking Y doesn't really rotate. It just flips across an axis. Like, it doesn't... Well, that still rotates. Interesting. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Okay, so we have this here. If we were to rotate this, we would expect this to be on the bottom and this to be here, essentially. So in order to do that, we have to alternate it. And if we just do that, it doesn't work. But if we unflip, it does. Now this is here and this is here. Now, from this perspective, it would make sense that this looks like I'm rotating, but it's not. That's flipping. So if I want to go the other way, I unalternate and flip the Y. And now I've really rotated. And if I want to go here, I do that, I think. Interesting. Okay, so what are these parameters? I'm going to write this down. So we have 3 switches we can hit. Assuming this is our base point. No flips. This is just laying it out. Let's assume that's the base level. If we want to... So, 0, 0, 0 has... let's call this like this wide corridor north. That'll be our indicator of direction. This will be north. Then if we want to do south, we flip across the Y. That's south, I think. That seems pretty straightforward. We just do 0, 1, 0. Now, if we want to have this thing facing that way, then we alternate. So if we want to change it to be pointing in a different direction, now we're doing, that's west-ish. I mean, technically these are northwest, etc., etc. And that's just with an alteration. And then if we want to go east, then of course we stay in the same alteration, but we just flip, and we flip across not the Y, but the X. So north-south, just flip. West-east, we need to alternate, so we're in a different, like, so we swapped what was X and Y, and then we just flip across X to go the two different directions. So this, just toggle on and off Y to like do a 180, and then to get us into like the 90-degree shift, we alternate, and if we want to go back and forth on that 90-degree shift, then we just flip across X. That's how we do north, south, west, east with this system, without having to actually do any camera flips, but just by redrawing the world. Fascinating. So gotchas. So why we probably can't do this long term. As fun as this is, like, problems we would have is what Amorphous already brought up, is it means that we need to take into account every direction of building. So anything that we make, if it's like a tree, we now have to have all four directions of that tree. Technically, this one wall looks like it's from all directions, but that's just because it's only one facing, and our brain kind of does the magic to be like, oh, it's just got a backside, but it's just the same piece of art everywhere. But a tree, you might want a different side on. Houses, you might want different sizes if the houses aren't made up of the exact same pieces. And even then, what about like windows or decorations? How do we handle those? Like, do we have to coordinate what side a window is on a house? Is that based off of the tile piece? Like, I don't know. There's a bunch of weird questions with decos, essentially. But then that also leads into the next point, which is right now I'm generating everything off of here, but there's no reason why eventually we might not want to be like, oh, you know what? I want to add some extra detail. This one here is a different color because that's a switch or something. And maybe I want to add, like, these walls don't match anymore, but maybe I want to add like one of these types of things. And you might want to add more decoration throughout the scene. And by doing that, you're now no longer able to hit the generate button. So either our generation stuff has to be 100%. It has every single piece of information that we would ever want in the game. So if there's any like variations in floors or something, we would want that variation to be like, you know, 101 or something, like some sort of code to say what type of tile we want for every single square, which is a little more than I think I want. But that's what we would have to do. If we want to use this and say, oh, we'll never have any differentiating, like we'll never be able to hand draw anything. We can never pencil in anything. It has to all be 100% in our TSVs, in our map data. That's the only way that we could do true, like, rotation, essentially. And that's a pretty big limiter. And it's also a pretty hefty requirement for the art side as well. So, unlikely, but that doesn't mean that when we bring in a map, if I make a map in here and I'm drawing out a whole thing and I build an entire dungeon that you are to explore, I might still want to come in here, and the first time I generate it, I might want to like choose an angle that I'm like, oh, you know what, I really like this specific one or this specific one. There's something about this one that I think really looks the coolest. And then once I've decided on that, then I will never hit this generate button again, and I'll only ever like be editing it by painting over it, essentially. But we still have the flexibility with this thing to decide what direction we want when we start. We might never allow the player to in-game rotate the map, but as a designer, I might want to rotate the map for deciding which way I want to orient my dungeon. Cool. That was a journey. Oh, I gotta go. That's it. We're at time for me. Some ways we got further than what I thought we would, and other times I thought we would get more. So, I don't know. I think it was fairly productive. The main points are we didn't get the generating of a palette, but we did get generating tiles, and then we did get generating from a tile map. The next stages of this is going to be making it so that this isn't hard-coded values. We can continue to do this moving forward, but honestly, I'd love to actually get it so that it looks at like a palette. So we can give it a palette to use, and then inside of that palette, it like checks for like the specific types of tiles, and then if we want, we could change out the palette to be something else and be like, oh, you know what, I actually want the sandy ruins, like the desert tile palette, and I'd be able to drag in a different palette and hit generate and build the exact same map but with different art, because it would be a different palette that we use. So yeah, that would be another next steps. But technically this works. It's just a little tedious for every different type of tile we might want to add. Like if we want to add a different type of wall that goes next to the sewer instead of the same wall that is above ground, then we'd have to add another parameter. So I think there's ways to make this more expandable. But overall, this is cool. The next other big thing is collision. In the way this collision works in the system is you have to lay down tiles for every single spot, and that was the other big thing with this system is I don't want to hand place every piece of collision every time. This will allow me to generate a kind of baseline collision for all the walls at the same time. In the same way that I generated like floors and walls, I might generate collision at the same time. Anyways, I'm rambling. That's going to be it for me. I've got to go. I'll probably be back tomorrow with some more of this. I might do some work off camera, so I'll start the stream with that if I do. But if not, we'll probably be looking at tile maps, collisions, and